There's one conundrum for Milvus shooters, Zeiss shooters that are looking to evaluate which of the great telephoto lenses in the Milvus lineup to buy. I'm speaking specifically about the new APO Sonar 135mm f2 in the Milvus line that is just announced a couple of weeks ago, and also the Milvus 100mm f2, and this is the macro planar lens. And while they're not emphasizing that as much, it is a 1 to 2 times macro lens, and so it will produce half life-size images. And so I just wanted to give you a quick head-to-head comparison, because I was actually surprised because the APO Sonar lens is basically optical perfection. But I was surprised at how well the 100mm f2 Milvus held its own. Okay, we're going to just quickly review a few aspects of the lens performance from both the Milvus 100 and then the Milvus 135. So first of all, I just thought I'd give you a quick look at what the difference in maximum magnification is. Both of these I've set up at their minimum focus distance, and so this is what 1 to 2 looks like on the left side and 1 to 4 looks like on the right side. So you can see that it is significant, but now we'll put them in a little bit more of an apples to apples comparison here. And so first let's look globally at the image. You can see that there is a little bit more vignette on the 100mm, which is now on the right side, compared to the 135 on the left. And if we look in close at the details, you can see that there is more resolution on the 135. You can see a better contrast, for example, in these textures here. See how very crisp they are on the 135, less so on the 100mm. Looking at our main subject here, though, I mean, everything looks pretty fantastic from both of the lenses. If we move towards the center of the image, we're going to find a similar story, although the plane of focus shows a little bit of that chromatic aberrations, purple fringing that's showing up on the 100mm that obviously isn't there on the 135. And if we pull over to the right side, I think here is maybe the most noticeable difference, in that on some of the shiny surfaces here you can see some of that chromatic aberration, but I particularly want you to focus on the texture here of the focus ring of this old lens. You can see how incredibly crisp and what incredible micro contrast there is on the grip surface there, while it's a little bit muddier on the 100mm. And so in terms of the micro contrast, although both of them are very good, the 135 is the standout lens here. Now if we were to stop down a couple of stops to f4, we'll do a similar kind of comparison. Let's start on that same side that we are on. And here you can see that the difference is not quite so dramatic any longer between the two, both exhibiting very good micro contrast. There's still just the hint of some of that purple fringing on the shiny surface that's not present here, and maybe just the hint around some of the white, that transition from the white to the black, that contrast zone that's there. But otherwise, they're looking pretty, both of them looking pretty fantastic. If we look towards the center, a similar story. The purple fringing is pretty much cleared up here in the center, and both of them are exhibiting a very good performance, although I still give a little bit of a favor to the texture rendering of the 135. On the left side, a similar story here, just a little bit more micro contrast and definition in the rendering there. But overall, they're both, delivering an exceptional performance. Now both of these are very viable portrait lenses, and so I wanted to just kind of show you the difference in a, we'll call this more of a full-length portrait here, and I think it would be pretty similar if you were shooting in a, say in a portrait orientation and shooting a full body. And so as you can see, looking at the global image, you can see that, number one, there's certainly a little bit more of a blurring of the background. There's a fair amount of room here. But even here, as we look back towards this kind of flowers region, you can see that the longer focal length of the 135 has diffused that background a little bit further, and so it's just a little bit softer, although both of them give a very pleasing out-of-focus rendering. Now, if we jump in and we look at the face here, which of course is our main subject, you can see that there is a little bit more texture that is rendered there, like on the cheek, for example, and perhaps in the eyelash area. But both of these are very sharp. And by the way, these are raw files that have been converted to DNGs, but other than the basic transformation, there is no other touches that have been done here. So there's no additional sharpening that's been added, but as you can see, even without any kind of native sharpening, even in kind of the less sharp DNG or raw format, there's still a tremendous amount of resolution in both of them, just a little bit more noticeably in the 135. Now also at f2, but if we move in a little bit closer to more of a head and shoulders focal length, again, you can see the background here is pretty much completely diffused for the 135. It's a beautiful portrait lens, there's no question about it. But also at the same time, I think that the background rendering on the 100 is very nice as well. They're both they're pretty fantastic portrait lenses. Now, you can see a difference here in the depth of field. In both cases, the right eye is the focus point, but you can see at head and shoulders distance how that with the 135, now that the opposite eye as left as we face it, the left eye is defocused, whereas it's still, you know, reasonably sharp here with the 100 millimeter. So, I mean, depending on what you want to accomplish, that could also be a consideration. And then as we look at that focus point, in this case being that right eye, or as we face it, you can see that the eyelashes are more sharply rendered and a little bit more texture on the cheek itself. But both of these are exquisitely sharp, and so if really, I don't think that you need to be held back from making your choice based on image quality. They both produce exceptional image quality. Really, when it comes down, I will say that there is one optical strength of the APO Sonar 135 over the Milvus 100, and that is that the Milvus 100 will show chromatic aberrations wide open in certain situations, and even stop down a stop or two, they become mostly eliminated, but you can still see them in a few situations. The Milvus 135 has no chromatic aberration that I can tell. But beyond that, it's pretty amazing how similar the image quality is from the two lenses. They both are incredibly sharp at f2, and that sharpness extends across the frame corner to corner. They both have amazing micro contrast, and when I did the head-to-head comparison in my final review of the Milvus 100, I compared it to the Canon 100mm f2.8L macro lens, and that lens is amazingly sharp, but you can definitely tell a difference in the overall contrast out of the Milvus 100. And when I compared the Milvus 135 to either the new Tamron 85 VC, or I compared it to the Canon 135L, it has a noticeably higher amount of contrast and that micro contrast and rendering details. And so while both of those are sharp lenses in their own right, the 135 and the 100 are both sharper than them. And so optically, they're both pretty fantastic. So let's look at setting that aside. And so, you know, on the negative list, the Milvus 100 does have some chromatic aberration. However, to balance things out, it's also a more versatile lens in that it provides, instead of the 1:4 magnification ratio of the 135, it has a 1:2. And so 0.25 life size, 0.5 life size. And of course, you throw on extension tubes on either of these and you can quickly get to full life size magnification, but you'll get there more quickly and more easily with the Milvus 100. Of course, there's other considerations on top of that. I find that kind of depending on your shooting situation, you may find that the 100mm focal length is a little bit more flexible than the 135. Sometimes I find that 135mm can make things a little bit tight. But the upside of the 135mm focal length is if you are shooting portraits, particularly full body portraits, 135mm has the ability to give you a really unique subject isolation, really make backgrounds melt away in a way more noticeable than that of the 100mm. They're obviously different sizes. The 100mm is a more compact lens. It weighs a fair bit less. It's 843 grams versus 1123 grams. It has a 67mm front filter thread instead of a 77mm front filter thread. It's also a little bit shorter. It's about a ½ inch shorter, or 11 millimeters shorter, and so it's a more compact lens overall. Beyond that, they both have full weather sealing. They're beautifully made. They both have the 9 aperture blades, and so a lot of the aspects of them are similar. There is a difference in price. The new Milvus 135 retails at $21.99, whereas the Milvus 100 is $1,850. So they're both expensive, but you are saving a significant amount of money by purchasing the Milvus 100 over the 135. And so I would say at the end of the day, it really comes down to what focal length suits your purposes more. I noted when I did the Milvus 100 review that it really is a great lens for those of you that are wedding photographers, because it allows you to get in and shoot the details of rings or decorations, and that 1 to 2 magnification is pretty huge. In a lesser sense, you can do the same thing with the Milvus 135, and of course with a great working distance, but it's not going to have as much magnification. And there may be some situations where if you're shooting indoors, that 135 millimeters is just too long for you, and you may want to look at another focal length. But just to break it down for you, they're both exceptional lenses, so choose the one, if you're looking at either one of them, that really suits your shooting needs the most. And you're not going to lose out by purchasing either of these lenses. They are exceptional. I'm Dustin Abbott, and if you haven't already, you can follow me on social media. I'll throw a link to both of these lenses in my review and image galleries of them, and then also links where you can purchase them. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching today. Have a great day.